So, first and foremost, Alan, what do you think the key to understanding British history is?
The key to understanding the history is to read the records, which are generally neglected, and not to go and where the record tells you there is something or names, go to the place that the record identifies. And if you do that, you're on a very good start, because you begin to understand the ancient geography and what was going on. So it's a matter of getting around Britain a little bit, or around specific places, and reading what's in the records. People don't read records, they write histories without it.
Why do you think so few people actually understand the history of Britain?
I think
really happened.
Well, I think it's because of the education system. And there's been a concentration on certain aspects. The Norman conquest and the Anglo-Saxon invasions, certain they were key events, let's face it, but they've been allowed to dominate the situation, and there's been an exclusion of other matters. And there's been a tendency to see, because of London, Oxford, Cambridge being centres of excellence, which they are, in both government and learning, but to therefore see them as being always that way, and other places not having any sort of status of the same kind at all.
Do you think that over the course of your life you've seen evidence that there has been an English establishment conspiracy to falsify the true British historical timeline?
Yes, and it mainly centres around a perceived notion that they have to do everything possible to centre everything around the royal family in London. There's been an overemphasis on London and the royal family. The British claim to be Trojans is fundamental, because that means that an intelligent, developed civilization arrived from Troy, not people wearing bearskins and running around with spears and mumbling to each other as the ancient Brits are portrayed. Nothing like that. It's a total mistake. They talk about Britain as if Britain was out in the mid-Atlantic, separated from Europe, whereas that doesn't tie in with Greek and other references and ancient references to Britain. You know, how they describe Britain as a thriving place with intelligent people and universities and so on, and yet we're told it was people wearing bearskins grunting at each other around campfires. It was an advanced country, and it had schools and education and universities, and these were literate people in every respect, and they were skilled in metalworking. And
that's right.
They were a civilization.
Yes, and in fact, the nobility of Europe used to send their sons to be educated here.
Yes, they did. That was the practice. Right across Western Europe, they would send their sons to the British colleges to be educated. That's true.
The critical part, the first piece of the jigsaw, really, for people to understand what's happened, is to understand that Britain was named after and founded by Brutus.
Well, that's fundamental, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. I mean, so if you can locate Brutus, you can get his family right, then you get his foundation period right. So it is vital to do that. We did study Brutus in some detail, which appears in our works, as you know.
Which places in Britain do you think hold the greatest secrets of our history?
Well, it's not the greatest secrets, it's where we might find evidence. And the real evidence, actually, in our opinion, is in South East Wales, because that's where they stood up and the records were preserved, and there was a continuity there. Continuity didn't really happen so much in other parts of Britain, with migrations and all sorts of warfare and different people coming and going. But there was continuity there, and they were a very powerful state. And they preserved their histories, as most do, around kings. I was sent to West Wales as a boy. I was got bombed in Cardiff, my grandmother's house. And we went down to West Wales. My father was working 7 days a week in the steelworks. My mother was in hospital. And so myself, I was 9, my brother is 10, my little brother about 2 or 3. My father put us on a train, sent us on an epic journey to West Wales, because my grandmother had adopted a son who was adopted brother of my mother, and he had a farm down there. My father wanted to get us away from the bombing, and he couldn't cope. And so we went on an epic journey to West Wales. And that's when I became introduced really to Welshness and Welsh Wales and language and so on. Because we went to the school and all the teaching was in Welsh. We're teaching in Welsh, speaking in Welsh, everybody spoke Welsh in those days.
The triads, the historical triads of Cambria, as you know, they mention the common tongue because they consider that as one of the imperatives of a good civilised society.
Oh, it's got to be so. Yeah.
So do you believe that the ancient British language, which became Welsh because it's the same language, do you believe that that was once the common tongue around Europe?
Well, if you want to translate some of the ancient Etruscan, use Welsh. You can read ancient Etruscan, it's written in Welsh. And other similar instances occur further east. You can get inscriptions that are untranslatable, but not if you read them as Welsh. And you have to realise there's an ancient Welsh alphabet. And we have the equivalent, that's an A, that's a B, that's a C. So if you know the equivalent symbol is A, B or C, and you know the language, you can read. That's what we've been doing. You can read the Egyptian hieroglyphs easily, but not in English, but you can read them in Welsh. And that's incredible. And they always said it was the language of heaven, you see. That's the designation of it.
It's clear that there has to be a serious motivation for the establishment to do what they've done to the Welsh language, to Welsh culture and the Welsh people. And I know it's not to call the Welsh isn't really correct anyway, but that's the way it is now.
Welsh,
yes.
Welsh means stranger.
Exactly, certain strangers.
So
yes.
we're strangers in our own country because the Anglo-Saxons have come in 1,000 years later. That's a handy one.
So it basically, what do you think is the motivation of the establishment, right from the beginning of the persecution of the Welsh culture? What do you think was the motivation behind it?
Well, if you could make everybody speak the same language and have the same customs, you could have peace and harmony. But if you had one area speaking one language with their own customs, another area across the border with different language, different customs, there was always a potential conflict. And in most countries, the immigrant takes on the language of the country he's moving into. They reversed that. They brought the language in and said, you've got to get rid of yours. So it was a case of attempted harmony, I would think. Every empire does that. The English, they call it British Empire, did the same thing. They went to other civilizations in Africa and India, everywhere, and their ideas were wrong and ours was right, and you had the British Raj in India and so on. When a notable person died, king, they buried him in a prominent position. So usually where the grave could be seen, not hidden. And obviously the bards all wrote down exactly where they were buried, and they gave the place and the directions to get there. And so the idea of it perpetuated the idea of unity because of the king after the king after the king. It was a solidifying effect. And so we have the songs of the graves, and they say this king's buried there and this king's buried there. And this goes on and on. And if you go there, there's a big grave mound. And the place names, usually the old place names are the same, you know. And they're named for the king or for something to do with the king. And by using the songs of the graves, and they also wrote grave elegies, right from a very early period. And so they wrote an elegy on the old king who just died and said where he was buried. So really you've got it's like having an AA map to drive your car, you know, go here, go there, go along that road, and here you are. And so they said where the kings were buried. And there's no problem. The problem is, how on earth is no academic caught onto this? The saints were all members of the royal family. You couldn't be a saint, with one exception I think, unless you were a son or brother of the king. Well, that got one way of getting out of by making him a bishop or a holy man. That stopped arguments over succession, doesn't it?
What makes you so certain that the Ark of the Covenant is buried in South East Wales?
Because there's a description of where it's buried. It actually says in the ancient records where it is. So I don't see the problem. It's
What does it describe? Could you just, in your could you say what they describe it as in the records?
well, it's a great box, isn't it? They describe it. It's clearly the Ark, and they do locate it. And all you do is go along there, and we took a metal detector with us. We had a guy who had a metal detector that would read down 20 feet. And it took two people to operate. One carried a frame and the other was away from him, the control devices. And we were able to identify it pretty clearly because the place names of the fields even said it. Every field in Wales used to have a name. Every field. And when modern times they mapped them, they gave them numbers, but they also wrote the names down. So the history is written in the land. And if you get the old maps, and the oldest you can get, and there were old people around who are now dead and gone when I was young, who could tell you where fields were and where things were.
Who is buried in Wales that virtually nobody knows about?
That no one knows about.
Virtually nobody.
Well, JC for a start.
Could you elaborate?
Jesus the Nazarene is buried in Wales.
Could you just describe the evidence that's led you to that conclusion?
Well, there is a poem and other records that say so. It does clearly say that that's him. It's a very clear. It couldn't be anybody else. Put it that way.
Why not?
Well, the description is so precise. I mean, it's the one grave you would not lose, isn't it?
Where is JC buried?
JC's buried in West Wales. I was taken as a little boy of 9, and my older brother's 10, and my little brother's 2. The house was bombed in Cardiff, and my grandmother was my mother was in hospital. My father was doing 7 days of work a week in a steelworks, and my grandmother had gone down to her son, Ernie Evans, with a farm down there, so we were put on a train and sent down to West Wales. This is where it all started with me. So I used to listen to the old pubs. You could, when you were a kid, there were little pubs everywhere. Every street had a pub in the village, And they weren't making money like pubs do today. They were just like a corner shop. One-room pubs, and kids could walk in and sit down, and they didn't ban you from the pubs. As long as you stayed quiet, you could listen to the conversations, and you could go in the pub and sit down, and they'd be typing in Welsh, and they'd often speak in English for you, so you could understand, And so I listened to all those stories of the old guys sitting there, and they were an area where it was customary for the elder son to inherit the land of the farm, and the younger sons went to sea. They became sailors. It was everybody in my family, Uncle this, Uncle that, they were all sailors. My grandfather and everybody, they were all sailors. And they'd come back full of knowledge and talk, and so that they all had stories to tell, But some of the stories were about history, you see, and you could listen to it and hear what they were talking about. And it occurred to me later that what they were saying was nothing like what's in the history books. Either the folklore down the ages had become corrupted, or the history books were wrong.
And what did they tell you about JC?
Oh, he was buried there. He's down here. He's there, yeah.
And what was their explanation to you? How did they convince you that it was true?
Well, A, place names, and B, the fact that it was a grave. But the place names tell the story. Deeds Cross, City of the Cross, or Place of the Cross, things like that, you see. Pwllheli, and then, the names of the beaches, and everything fitted in with it being the right place. There's all sorts of ruined monasteries no longer there, things like that.
There are also very old tales of JC wandering through what was old Celeria. Some people mistake it as Devon and Cornwall, but he was walking through old Celeria,
Which is Glamorgan and
Which
Gwent.
is Glamorgan and Gwent, yes. Do you think that's true? Did he live out his days rather than dying on the cross? Did he live out his days in South East Wales?
Oh yeah, I would think yes. I think you have to, yes. Oh yeah, oh the idea he came to Wales, it was firmly fixed. But of course that would make you very, very unpopular with the church. And the Inquisition would probably torture you horribly for telling the truth, you know. You couldn't tell the truth, but he's definitely buried in West Wales. I know exactly where the grave is, and all the place names don't fit. All the place names tell the story. And your people in the village used to say, yeah, that's where it is there, you know. They knew, but they didn't tell any. But if you were from England, Ireland, they wouldn't talk to you, wouldn't tell you. But you see, my grandfather was from the village, and I was William Moyne's grandson, so I got to be told. There's a great mound.
A mound?
Oh, it's a mound.
Just a mound.
Oh, aye. And all the place names fit, once you know.
Did they leave originally a gravestone there? Is there a stone in existence?
There wouldn't be a stone, there'd be a mound in his day. 2000 years ago, there'd be a mound, you know the mound, you see.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
See, things like this happen. In Welsh, David is David in Welsh. And if you read all the old texts, Dewi is one with God. But nowadays you read a dictionary, it says Dewi, D-E-W-I, is a version of David. It's not. Dewi is one with God. So Dewi has to be JC. So once you know that, I think they deliberately altered it to be David, to conceal it.
Why do you think Dewi has to be JC? Because
It means one with God.
And was nobody out ever described like that?
No.
So
He's Dewi Sant, holy.
Right.
And Dewi means, you get the oldest dictionary of say 1520, something like that. It says Dewi, it means one with God. You get a modern dictionary, it says Dewi means David. It's bloody nonsense. Whether it's deliberate concealment, I would think they might be doing, because they definitely didn't like telling the English anything. Because when English people started getting interested in archaeology, some of them foolishly went into Wales and started asking questions and started digging things up. And that really got up their noses. That really upset them, because that's an ancestral grave. You keep off that. They wouldn't touch anything that was old, you see. You didn't touch that as an old grave. I was there, Prince so-and-so. They all knew. And so when English archaeologists started digging things, the shutters went up and the doors got slammed. But they didn't get slammed on me because I was one of them. But I can tell you exactly where he is.
Can you remember? That's fantastic. It really is. I mean, I've got the shivers. I'm not cold, but I've got the shivers. This
I
is
can
what
tell you
happens.
where he lived there.
Please do. You must get it all on film. But we'll come back to that. Yes, do it now. Where did he live?
Where I lived, when I was down there. I can't say because we've kept the secret. I mean, how am I going to let this out?
Because this is going to make all of your works go worldwide in one hit.
Well, there's a place called Cumdewi, Little Valley of One with God. And there's a house there. I lived in it. It's the only house there. And there's a cottage there. I think they built some further houses, bungalows and that down there now. It's Cumdewi. I lived in Cumdewi. And I was told all about it.
Oral tradition.
Aye. And there's Dinas Cross is the village. City of the Cross. What was City of the Cross?
So that was the place that Helen brought the cross, clearly, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
the City of the Cross. What are we talking about? You know, the Dinas Cross. It's in the middle of nowhere. And down from it is Pwllgwyland, and then Cummeragris, Little Valley of the Church, and it's Cumdewi. I lived in Cumdewi. And an uncle of my mother's, Di Cumdewi, his name was David Roberts, Di Cumdewi. He told me about it.
This is fantastic stuff.
So you go up on the thing, and there's the grave. The place names are correct. So what else? What?
And there's nothing to compare it to, is there?
No.
Nothing, no other place, anywhere.
No.
Where that similar things can be said on.
Yeah, but it's a magical sort of place.
Is it? I bet it is.
And I don't know, something happened to me down there, I don't know. 'Cause I've always been into this thing.
What do you think happened?
I don't know.
You mean you felt the presence of JC?
No, not presence of JC. It's like historical things come to me easily. You know, I know the whole damn shooting match. You know, all the place names and village names around there all fit. You know.